Started just after midnight. A light rain at first, barely a whisper, then louder like a warning. The power flickered, then went out completely, cloaking the house in shadows and silence. I was in the kitchen clutching a mug of tea when he appeared, my brother-in-law. His shirt clung to his chest, damp from the storm. His hair was wet, his eyes unreadable. We exchanged a glance, quiet, loaded, both aware that the house was empty except for the two of us. Then he stepped closer, his voice low, steady. And he said something I never thought I would hear from him. In that moment the air shifted. And so did everything between us. It had been one of those gray, dragging days, the kind where the sky hangs heavy, threatening to fall. My sister and I had planned to spend the weekend together at our family's lake house. Cozy, isolated, familiar. But she called last minute. Client emergency. Too much paperwork. She couldn't come. I was already there. Groceries unpacked, fireplace lit, music humming through old speakers. She suggested Ethan, her husband, come the next day to drop off a few things she had forgotten, a bag with her sketchbooks and an extra set of keys. Said yes. Seemed harmless. Routine. I had known Ethan for nearly 6 years. Reliable. Thoughtful. He observed more than he spoke. Always steady. I liked him the way you're supposed to like a sibling's spouse. Respectfully, distantly. Still there had been moments. Subtle ones. A look held a little too long. A gaze that lingered when he thought no one noticed. I dismissed them every time. Maybe I didn't want to look closer. Or maybe I already had. He arrived the following evening, right as the rain began to fall harder. He stood at the door, tall, soaked, a little breathless. Rain slid along his jaw. His hands were tucked in his jacket pockets. I didn't think it'd pour like this, he said with a smile, warm but uncertain. I handed him a towel and took his coat. His eyes lingered on mine for a second longer than they should have. We sat by the fire with mugs of tea. His favorite, black with a hint of cinnamon. Our conversation wandered. Work, friends, my sister. He talked about how exhausted she'd been, how distant she'd become, how hard her job was weighing on her. I listened, nodded, offered comfort, words I meant but didn't feel. And all the while he kept looking at me, not in a way that crossed a line but one that blurred it. It stirred something in me I'd spent years trying to silence. The lights flickered, then went out completely. I laughed softly, surprised. He got up to check the fuse box. Few minutes later he came back. Out for the night, he said. I handed him a candle. He lit it slowly. The flame danced between us. The silence of the house became a presence. Thick, waiting. No TV. No phones. No distractions. Just the rain tapping the windows and the creaking of old wood. We moved to the living room with blankets and a bottle of wine he'd brought from the city. One glass turned into 2, then 3. Our words turned into memories. Of when we met. Of that family trip in the mountains where we got snowed in. Of the day I helped him choose an anniversary gift for my sister. The way our hands brushed over the same book. The room grew warmer. Softer. His voice lowered. Gentle, vulnerable. He looked at me and then. I've thought about you more than I should have. The words hit like thunder in a quiet sky. Froze. I turned my face away, heart racing. He hadn't moved closer. Hadn't touched me. But the words were enough. Enough to unravel something I had tightly bound for years. I stood, pretending to refill my glass, when really I needed air. In the kitchen I gripped the counter, staring into the rain. Trying to remember what loyalty looked like. Trying to breathe. He entered quietly. Stopped at the doorway. I shouldn't have said that, he murmured. But I won't lie. I felt it for a long time. And I don't know what to do with it anymore. I turned to him, eyes meeting. I don't think this is our story to write, I said, my voice barely steady. He nodded. But he didn't leave. The silence returned, but now it was different. Waited. Live. I had trained myself for years to avoid these feelings. To be loyal. To bury guilt before desire even dared to surface. But I didn't feel guilty in that moment. Felt seen. Truly, painfully, fully seen. He didn't move. He just stood there. And I stood there too, trying to unfeel what I had already felt. I know how this looks, he whispered. I know how wrong it sounds. But I meant every word. I should have reminded him of my sister. Reminded myself. But I didn't. Because something inside me had cracked open. A part of me that had longed to feel desired. Not out of duty, not out of routine, but wholly. Deeply. I don't know what you expect me to say, I whispered. Nothing, he said. Just, don't pretend you haven't felt it too. The words shook something loose. Memories rushed in. Of him noticing when no one else did. Of late-night conversations. Of small moments that had always meant more than they should have. I'm scared, I admitted. Not of you. But of what this would mean. So am I. We stood in that space, neither moving. The thunder rolled again in the distance. I took a step back. I can't be a mistake on your way to figuring things out. You're not a mistake, he said, voice firm. You never were. I sat down at the kitchen table, overwhelmed. He didn't sit. He watched me. Quietly, he said, your sister and I. We haven't really been okay for over a year. We live together but we don't really talk. She's married to her job. And he paused. I stopped trying. Until I saw you again. I shook my head. You can't come to me looking for the pieces of your happiness. I'm not, he said. I just needed to say it. You make me feel alive again. That's the truth. We sat in silence again. Everything unsaid swirling around us. And then he whispered. If I had met you first. Closed my eyes. 'Cause I had thought it too. Too many times. I got up, walked to the living room and grabbed a blanket. I handed it to him. You should sleep in the guest room tonight. He nodded, shoulders heavy. Okay. Then before he left, he turned back. I'm sorry. For everything. For saying this. For putting you here. I just couldn't hold it in anymore. Good night, Ethan, I whispered. He walked away. I stood in the stillness, the storm outside no louder than the one within me. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake, haunted by every word, every look, every possibility, and the question that echoed over and over in my head. What if? The next morning arrived slowly. I hadn't slept. Just drifted in and out of restless thoughts. The sun pierced through the curtains weakly, as if even it wasn't sure it wanted to be here. I stayed curled on the couch, wrapped in a throw blanket, trying to ignore the clock. But time had moved. Too fast. And now it was real morning. And he was still here. I heard the soft creak of the guest room door. A step. Then silence. I didn't look up until he entered the kitchen, quietly pouring himself a glass of water. He looked tired, like he too had barely slept. His eyes met mine. Briefly. Morning, he said, voice cautious. He nodded. Morning. He leaned against the counter, not making a move. Just standing there waiting for something. Maybe for me to break the tension. Maybe for me to pretend it hadn't happened. But I couldn't. 'Cause everything had changed now. Even if we tried to act like it hadn't. I should go, he finally said. Your sister's expecting me back before noon. I nodded again. Still no words. Because what was left to say? He took a step toward the door. Then paused. I meant every word last night. But I understand if it's something you need to forget. That made me look up. Don't ask me to forget, I said quietly. Just don't ask me to do anything about it. He nodded. Long pause. And then he left. But the story didn't end there. 3 days later, I got a message from my sister. Ethan's been acting strange lately. Distant. Do you think he's okay? My chest tightened. Typed a reply. Deleted it. Typed again. He seemed a little tired when he came to the cabin. Maybe just stressed. A half-truth. But half-truths have sharp edges. They cut both ways. Weeks passed. I buried myself in work, tried to push the memory of that night out of my mind. But it clung to me, quietly, stubbornly. It was in the music I played. In the smell of cinnamon tea. In the way I now avoided looking at photos of my sister and him together. I hadn't seen him since. Until I did. It was a family dinner. Casual gathering. Warm lighting. Shared laughter. Wine glasses clinking. He walked in behind my sister, smiling like always. She held his hand. But I noticed how tightly. Like she was trying to hold on to something slipping. He greeted everyone. Then he saw me. And in that moment, something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Regret. Longing. All packed into a split-second glance. We exchanged a polite smile. Nothing more. But beneath the table, my hands trembled. That evening, as guests began to leave, I found myself alone on the porch, breathing in the night air. Then I heard his voice behind me. I shouldn't have come out here, he said, keeping a few feet of distance between us. But I had to see you. I didn't turn around. It's not fair, I said. To her. Me. To anyone. I know. I can't be a secret, Ethan. Not even in your mind. He stepped a little closer. I've started therapy. I'm trying to figure out who I am, what I want. But I need time. I finally turned to him. And what happens then? He looked pained. I don't know. But I know I can't unfeel what I feel for you. I tried. Believe me. I exhaled long and slow. Then try harder. He nodded, took one last look at me, and walked back inside. The hardest part isn't what happened. It's what could have. It's knowing someone saw a version of you that no one else did. And still, it had to end before it began. It's the ache of unrealized love. Of loyalty versus desire. Of the story that will never be told out loud. But it lives in the quiet spaces. In the questions we never answered. In the nights we can't forget. And maybe that's enough. Or maybe someday it won't be.